A 30, 60, 90 triangle is a special type of right triangle whose side lengths have a specific relationship to each other. This triangle consists of a 30-degree angle, a 60-degree angle, and a 90-degree angle. Now in all right triangles, the side across from the 90-degree angle is called the hypotenuse, and the other two sides are called the legs. The hypotenuse is always the longest side. The side across from the 30-degree angle is always the shortest leg, and the length of the side across from the 60-degree angle is the longer leg. To understand the relationship that exists between the side lengths of this triangle, we're going to assign a number to each side of the triangle. The shorter leg is 1, the hypotenuse is 2, and the longer leg is the square root of 3. It helps to realize that the square root of 3 is approximately 1.73, so its length is always greater than the shorter leg, but shorter than the hypotenuse. Assigning 1, 2, and square root of 3 to each side makes it easy to memorize the relationship that exists between the sides of a 30, 60, 90 triangle. Now let's go over how we can figure out the length of the sides of this triangle by just knowing one of the side lengths. If you know the length of the shorter leg and you want to know the length of the hypotenuse, you multiply the shorter leg times 2. 1 times 2 equals 2. If you know the length of the shorter leg and you want to know the length of the longer leg, you multiply the shorter leg times the square root of 3. 1 times square root of 3 equals square root of 3. If you know the length of the longer leg and you want to know the length of the shorter leg, you divide the longer leg by the square root of 3. Square root of 3 divided by square root of 3 equals 1. If you know the length of the longer leg and you want the length of the hypotenuse, the easiest way is to first get the length of the shorter leg by dividing by the square root of 3. Then take the length of the shorter leg and multiply it by 2. If you want to get the length of the hypotenuse in just one step, you would multiply the longer leg by the fraction 2 over square root of 3. If you multiply square root of 3 times 2 over square root of 3, we get 2 square root of 3 over square root of 3, and the square root of 3 cancels out, leaving us with 2. If we know the hypotenuse and we want to know the length of the shorter leg, you divide the hypotenuse by 2. 2 divided by 2 equals 1. If you want to go from the hypotenuse to the longer leg, the easiest way is to first get the length of the shorter leg by dividing by 2, then multiply the shorter leg by the square root of 3. If you want to go directly from the hypotenuse to the longer leg, multiply the hypotenuse by the fraction square root of 3 over 2. When you do this, you get 2 square root of 3 over 2, and the 2's cancel out, so we're left with the square root of 3. You can figure out all the side lengths by just memorizing these 4 easy steps. Multiply the shorter leg by the square root of 3 to get the longer leg. Multiply the shorter leg by 2 to get the hypotenuse. Divide the longer leg by the square root of 3 to get the shorter leg. Divide the hypotenuse by 2 to get the shorter leg. Another way to express this same relationship and how it's often written in textbooks is using variables. If we assign the variable n to represent the length of the shorter leg, we can then represent the length of the longer leg as n square root of 3 and the length of the hypotenuse as 2n. The process would still be the same as before. If you know the length of the shorter leg and you want to know the length of the hypotenuse, you multiply the shorter leg times 2. N times 2 equals 2n. If you know the length of the shorter leg and you want to know the length of the longer leg, you multiply the shorter leg times the square root of 3. N times square root of 3 equals n square root of 3. If you know the length of the longer leg and you want the length of the shorter leg, you divide the longer leg by the square root of 3. You can cancel out the square root of 3 in the numerator and the denominator, and you get n. If you know the length of the longer leg and you want the length of the hypotenuse, the easiest way is to first get the length of the shorter leg by dividing by the square root of 3. Then take the length of the shorter leg and multiply it by 2. If you want to get the length of the hypotenuse in just one step, you would multiply the longer leg by the fraction 2 over square root of 3. If you multiply n square root of 3 times 2 over square root of 3, we get 2n square root of 3 over square root of 3, and the square root of 3 cancels out, leaving us with 2n. If we know the hypotenuse and we want to know the shorter leg, you divide the hypotenuse by 2. When you divide 2n by 2, the 2's cancel out and you are left with n. If you want to go from the hypotenuse to the longer leg, the easiest way is to first get the length of the shorter leg by dividing by 2, then multiply the shorter leg by the square root of 3. If you want to go directly from the hypotenuse to the longer leg, multiply the hypotenuse by the fraction square root of 3 over 2. 2n times square root of 3 over 2 gives you 2n square root of 3 over 2. The 2's cancel out and you're left with n square root of 3. Example 1. Find the unknown side lengths. We are given the length of the side across from the 30-degree angle, which is the shorter leg. Let's first find the length of the longer leg. If we look at our reference triangle on the right, we can see that to go from the shorter leg to the longer leg, we need to multiply the shorter leg by the square root of 3. So let's multiply 5 times square root of 3, and that gives us 5 square root of 3. Now let's get the length of the hypotenuse. Our reference triangle shows us that to go from the shorter leg to the hypotenuse, we need to multiply the shorter leg by 2. So let's do that. 5 times 2 equals 10. So the length of our hypotenuse is 10. Example 2. We are given the length of the side across from the 90-degree angle, which is the hypotenuse. We have to find the length of the other two sides. Let's first get the length of the shorter leg. Our reference triangle on the right shows us that to go from the hypotenuse to the shorter leg, we need to divide the hypotenuse by 2. If we divide our hypotenuse, 4 square root of 3, by 2, we can simplify the 4 over 2 by dividing. This gives us the length of the shorter leg, which is 2 square root of 3. Now let's get the length of the longer leg. Our reference triangle on the right shows us that to go from the shorter leg to the longer leg, you must multiply the shorter leg by the square root of 3. So we're going to multiply 2 square root of 3 by the square root of 3. This gives us 2 square root of 9. Now we can simplify the square root of 9. The square root of 9 is 3. This simplifies our expression to 2 times 3. So we multiply 2 times 3 and that gives us the length of the longer leg, which is 6. For example 3, the first thing I want you to notice is that we are given the measures of 2 of the angles, but one is missing. Now you can probably guess what it's going to be, but since math problems are often presented with missing information, let's go over the process for finding the measure of that missing angle. We'll start by assigning the variable x to that angle. The sum of the interior angles of a triangle will always equal 180 degrees. So let's write the equation x plus 90 degrees plus 30 degrees equals 180 degrees. Now combine like terms. Subtract 120 from both sides of the equation and x equals 60 degrees. Now that we have established that we have a 30, 60, 90 triangle, let's identify all the sides. We are given the length of the side across from the 60-degree angle. This side across from the 60-degree angle is always the longer leg. The side across from the 30-degree angle is the shorter leg, and the side across from the 90-degree angle is the hypotenuse. Now since we know the length of the longer leg, let's find the length of the shorter leg. As you can see in our reference triangle on the right, to go from the longer leg to the shorter leg, we need to divide by the square root of 3. So we divide 9 by the square root of 3, but this presents us with a problem. The square root of 3 is an irrational number, and our answer is not considered simplified if we have an irrational number in the denominator. So we have to get rid of the irrational number in the denominator. The way we do this is through a process called rationalizing the denominator. To do this, we're going to take the radical that is in our denominator, in this case the square root of 3, and we're going to multiply both the numerator and the denominator by the square root of 3. Notice that the square root of 3 divided by the square root of 3 is equal to 1. So we're multiplying 9 over square root of 3 by a fraction that is equivalent to 1, which allows us to rewrite 9 over square root of 3 in a way that will no longer have an irrational number in the denominator without changing its value. Okay, so when we multiply, we get 9 square root of 3 over square root of 9. We can simplify our denominator. The square root of 9 is 3. Now we can simplify the 9 over 3 by dividing 9 by 3. This gives us our final simplified answer, which is 3 square root of 3. Now we still need to find the length of the hypotenuse. Since we now know the length of the shorter leg, all we have to do is multiply the shorter leg times 2 to get our hypotenuse. So we multiply 3 square root of 3 times 2, and that gives us the length of our hypotenuse, 6 square root of 3. Now it's time to practice what you learned. Here are 3 practice problems. Afterwards, we'll go over the solutions. Make sure to pause the video if you need additional time. Time's up. Now let's look at the answers. How well did you do? Make sure to let everyone know how well you did in the comments. If you found this video helpful, take 1 second to hit that like button and subscribe to the Math Discipline channel so that you can always have access to the best math lessons online. Don't forget to share this video with your friends so that they can get awesome at math too. Thanks for watching.